So, how did I get started with my podcast? Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. Anchor is free. There's a creation tool that allows you to record and edit your podcast, and you can do this right from your phone or computer. They'll even distribute your podcast so that you don't have to do it yourself, and it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You could even make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. And that is amazing, especially for someone starting out new in the podcast circuit. So it's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Believe me, it was a lifesaver when I decided to do this podcast. Hi, I am Dr. G, and welcome to Black Goddess Healing and Manifestation. I am happy that you've decided to join me. This is our very first podcast on this platform, and I am just enthusiastic to get started with this project. This has been something that I have been wanting to do for a very long time, and so we are actually launching in 2020. I figured this was the year to do so. It's the year of the 4, and it's time to create as well as give back to our collective. And I'm going to start off just by telling you a little bit about myself, as well as our kind of topics that we'll be talking about on this platform. We're not going to go too far into content today, as I wanted to leave this as an introduction and welcoming all of you to the podcast. So let me start a little bit about myself. I'm Dr. G. I am actually a doctor in regards to my professional life. I have actually 2 doctoral degrees and also bachelor's, master's, all in the areas of psychology and therapy and health sciences. And so my professional life really intersects with spirituality, and that I look at the physics of things that are around us, really pulling from some of our ancient African practices that have such strong connections to science and to physics, even if we don't realize that they're not disconnected, but they are in alignment. And when we become in alignment with those concepts, then we can have a greater understanding about ourselves and about where we are headed in this life and how to pretty much navigate this journey with a little more ease and a little more grace. And one of the areas that I really love is looking at neuroscience and looking at the brain. And I don't go too heavy into that. Even when I'm doing professional lectures, I don't like to bore people. I like to keep it exciting and interesting. And so I make those connections for us, and so that we can really have a better understanding of how we can shape our lives. How can we influence those things that are already there, that we may think that are set in stone, but are actually permeable and malleable. And so we can shape, what happens in terms of manifestation, as well as what happens in terms of our mental and physical health. And we will talk a little bit about how dis-ease in this life really can lead to and equate to disease within our body. And so we are now entering into this new phase, this new decade. And today that I am recording is January the 10th and going into the 11th. And one thing that we are currently experiencing this evening, and depending on where you are, perhaps tomorrow, is the lunar eclipse. And this the lunar eclipse, and full moon that's occurring right now is the full moon is in Cancer. And I don't go a lot into astrology. I am not an expert in astrology. I love to follow it. I am an enthusiast of it. But I will share here and there some of the things that I am learning and hearing. And I do know that this full moon that we're entering is going to be pretty powerful. And one of the things that we need to be aware of is the energy. I am feeling this energy around us, as a lot of people are feeling negativity. I'm not sure what to do with that negativity. I think part of it comes from our anticipation of the new year bringing on newness and love and light, and that is not always the case. And so I do want to start our conversation off today by talking a little bit about that energy. That'll be something that we talk about on this podcast, is how we are all vessels of energy. And being vessels of energy, we are actually part of Source or of God, however we want to identify it. I try my best to be inclusive and to not offend anyone. If you have a specific religion that you're following, that is something that is a personal choice. It's not for me to influence you to go either direction or to have any cast judgment over anyone's religion. I personally find beauty in everything. In saying that, I will use terminology that is not exactly placing labels. And so when we think about ourselves as being vessels of energy, we have to consider that we are actually carrying part of that source energy that comes from the divine creator, that comes from the universe. And we are here to experience it all. And I really appreciate the efforts of our love and light carriers, the individuals that have a strong passion for that. I do myself, but I also am a realist and acknowledge that we live in what we call a duality. And, my love of science teaches us that everything in this life has a positive, a negative, a north, a south, your higher vibration, a lower vibration. And we have to be able to acknowledge that those things do exist, and it exists for a reason. So just imagine that if we didn't have friction in this world, what it would look like. Think about friction being necessary for us to move around, to drive, for instance, to be able to have objects, move from one surface to the next. Without friction, everything would be chaotic and kind of just sliding around and not having any order. So this kind of goes back to the Kemetic teachings, which I'm not going to go too far into. But when you think about that, the need for chaos and order, it is necessary, and it catapults us to ascension into the next level of this life. And right now, if you are feeling negativity and negative energy, we often question why. Why do we need that? Why do we need chaos? Things could be going great. We could have a wonderful position at work. We could have a great relationship with a spouse, our partner. Kids are great. Everything is going well. And then bam, out of nowhere, here comes conflict or chaos or challenges, obstacles. And we question why. And it seems to be a rhythm to that. It seems to be a pattern. It's almost as if when you're sitting back and everything seems great, something's going to come my way. Well, I want to shift your mentality with thinking like that. Because yes, something is inevitable. It's going to come. That's part of life, and it's necessary. But it's how you view it. However you're viewing your position in this life, your experiences in this life will be. If you call it an obstacle, if you call it suffering, if you call it something that is hurtful, it will be. We are actually our own creators. We are part of creating this reality for ourselves. So if you start to change your mindset and your view, then you will change the outcome as well as how much of that heaviness you may feel. Negativity, is something that may be coming more from what we would call, darkness, dark energy versus light energy. You make it negative by how you experience it. Let me give you an example. So when you look at two magnets, you have positive charge on one end and you have a negative charge on the other. And when you place, let's say, two positives next to each other or two negatives, and you try to push those magnets together, and you can try with all your might to push and to force, and you will feel resistance. And eventually, if you were to let go of those two magnets and allow them to just be, they will fall into alignment. The positive and the negative will line up together, and they will attach to each other, and they will connect. That's how life is for us. When you decide to stop resisting and let it go, you will see things come into alignment. That doesn't mean to give up. That doesn't mean to just throw your hands up and let God take the wheel. That's not what I'm saying. The first step into stopping this resistance, into letting your hands go off of those magnets, if you will, is to connect to your source, to your higher self, to your ancestors, to your spiritual team, to your spiritual guides, your guardian angels. When you connect with them, they will give you the answers that you are seeking. That is the first part of stopping the resistance, of trying to control. And once you have that connection and that relationship, and you sit still and you listen, and this comes through meditation, which we will talk about, and you receive that downloaded information, you then can release and go in knowing what your next steps will be. It is not that you have pushed away this challenge. You haven't buried it away. You haven't tried to resist it or ignore it. You haven't tried to control it, but you now have the answers on what it is and how to flow with that energy. So positive and negative energy is necessary. Even in science, we know that our bodies, within our every cell, in neurology we call our nerve cells neurons, and every neuron, cell body, in order for energy to be sent between one to the next, there is a positive and a negative charge and an exchange between that energy for that message to be sent. So in order for your receiving of messages from your spiritual team and for your ascension, the positive and negative exchange is key. It is necessary. So as you think about this concept, I want you to think about another concept. I want you to think about the idea of let go, let God. That is something that I know in the Black community, especially within the Christian religion, it's a phrase that is often utilized. And it's a phrase that for some may appear to be helpful, and when you're experiencing discourse in your life, but I want to redefine that as well. So our next podcast will be talking about redefining that term, that phrase of letting go and let God. And we're going to redefine how to do that, and perhaps taking that label off of it and knowing the goddess that lives within you and the connection that you do have to source, and why we are here and how we can bring about the answers and stay on path, and why we experience discomfort when we're off our path. So I thank you for joining me for this short first initial inaugural broadcast, and I hope you come back for more. Thank you. Take care.